So I think that was a really wonderful session, beautiful presentation actually. I love that. So today we're going to talk. We're going to not today. Right now we're going to shift gears a little bit. So I'm Sanil Pillai. I'm the director for Infostretch Labs at Infostretch. So Infostretch is a professional services, digital first professional services company. So we provide services around automation, mobile development, cloud, DevOps, anything that helps you achieve your digital transformation. So I run a group called Infostretch Labs, which is essentially the innovation group at Infostretch. So I'm responsible for driving innovation across the company. And so this topic here is pretty exciting to me and very near and dear to me. Last week I was in Florida and it was a testing conference. Anyone was at Star East last week? Okay, so sunny Florida, no one wanted to be there. But the topic was automation, right? And so guess what should have been on everyone's mind? Automation, correct? But guess what was on everyone's mind? AI, right? So you look at every session now, there is some semblance of AI. People are talking about AI in some form, and not without a reason, because this is a technology which is now entrenched testing in a big way. Right. So a lot of you are Tricentis customers, and you've probably seen some semblance of that in some form. So today I want to cover in the next 1 hour, 25 minutes, what does AI mean in terms of testing, and why, the why, what, and the how. Okay. Let's go forward. So the agenda is going to be something like this. So we can talk about really the motivations for AI. So why AI, right? I mean, AI is cool, but why AI in testing? So there's going to be some talk about that. We talk about where AI can be applied and what are the areas where you can see AI today being used, and in the future you will see them being used. And then of course we'll talk about AI readiness. So this is something at Infostretch we talk a lot about with our prospects and clients. Because whenever we have discussions with our prospects about AI, they want to start like tomorrow and get it done by end of the week. Right. So AI, although it's a 2-letter term, it means a lot of things. So there has to be an AI readiness concept, and we started talking about it a lot. What does it mean to be AI ready in your organization? And they are not very different than what you typically do in your automation today, but we do want to talk about it. It's very important. So we'll talk about AI readiness, and finally we'll talk about some AI methodologies in action. And finally we have one of our customers, Varian, and we have Murli here. We'll just speak about 5 minutes of some things we have done around AI readiness within Varian, essentially. So let's look at the first dimension of why AI. So this dimension is essentially about SDLC evolution, right? So you probably have seen this graphic in the past, few sessions, etc. But the idea is that if you look at the composition of DevOps and tests, and if you see how it has moved from left to right, you can see testing is kind of reducing in terms of percentage, but it's not really reducing in terms of percentage in terms of importance, right? It's really getting down in terms of the effort that you really want to spend on testing, right? Now, if you look at the real needs of digital transformation, one of the big needs are really to be able to kind of have software out there more often and more fast, right? Anyone here who has been asked to kind of deliver software really slowly, that'd be cool though, right? But it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Right? It's going to be much faster than where you are today in the next few months and few years. So what that means is that this composition and this transformation of moving to lower effort spent on testing, but getting a larger churn in terms of your software output is basically inevitable, correct? So how do you get a lot of testing done with lesser effort spent on it? AI might be the solution to help you in some way, right? So all of you, when you start from manual to automation, the reason you do that is because you want to spend less effort doing it, less error prone, and you want to make it more automated, right? So that's why you do automation. Now you reach the hilt with automation. Now you want to take it to the next level and see that, okay, how do I really, I've got this complex software. And as you heard in the previous session, your software can really, the rectangle of what you need to do is really large. How do you make sure that you cover a lot of it without spending a lot more time, in a linear fashion? And AI could be the solution for doing that. So there are a few things, a few data points there. For example, adoption of automation has increased by 200%. And that is a prerequisite for a lot of AI that we need to do, and that is a good thing, right? But at some point, you're going to hit the limit with just pure automation, and you've got to think of newer technologies. So this is one motivation or one dimension as to why we need to start thinking about AI within automation. The next one is, think about digitally focused organizations. Now, if you look at the list of questions here, these are questions which typically a CIO might ask and see, within my organization, am I kind of, getting these things done? And I've underlined a few things which are really important, right? It talks about ready to embrace digital, right? It's very cliche to talk about ready to embrace digital. Everyone wants to go digital, but really to embrace digital is not just a matter of taking your processes and automating it and getting RPA in place. Really to embrace digital is to be able to also work at the speed and the agility that digital demands, right? Show value to my business partners, right? How many of you have been asked to show value in what you do? Only one. The rest of you probably don't know, but you've been asked to do that, right? So the reason why show value is so complex is because, how do you quantify, right? Do I quantify it in terms of less number of bugs? Do I quantify it in terms of my budget? Do I quantify it in terms of, how many P1s I could catch within the shortest period of time? It's not a race, right? So value is really, how am I really helping my business expand by really making QE least of the problems in the organization, right? It's real value, right? How do you provide value to your organization? Agile, I'm not going to talk about agile because I think the last couple of days you heard a lot of agile, right? So, everyone's moving agile, so that's definitely a given. If you look at the last few things in there, the CIO is really asking about, AI and collaborative technologies, and why are they asking? Because they've seen AI do wonders within their core business, right? If you take Procter & Gamble, for example, right, or any technology company, they're using AI for a lot of their core processes, and they're seeing really wonders come out of it. So the question is, why not in IT, right? So it is a question that's been asked, if AI can really help my business expand, get me more revenues, top line and bottom line, why not IT? Why can't it be revamped through AI, right? So that is a question that's coming up. And finally, you have the last wrinkle, which is AI-based applications, right? So what's happening is that you have AI applications coming in, which are really applications driven by AI. The question is, how do you really test it now, right? Can you test it using your standard methodologies that you always had, or do you need to now add a layer of more intelligence to make it happen? So these are the different motivations from a digital initiatives perspective, and that is the second dimension for what you need to think about. Why is it really important to really think about AI? Okay. The third part is really looking at current challenges in testing, right? Anything in here which any of you do not resonate with, right? This is pretty standard challenges in testing. If you go from left to right, what you see on the left is really current issues that you always optimal coverage among huge backlog of test cases, right? So when you talk about optimal coverage, what does it mean? You have 100,000, 200,000 test cases. Anyone has 500,000 or more test cases they have to automate? 250,000, 100,000, 10,000, something? Anyone has any test cases you have to automate here? Okay, good. So the idea, so we work with one of our customers where we are kind of trying to help them automate more than 500,000 test cases, right? 500,000 is a big number. Now, if you try to take that and try to automate it, what would you do? Would you just take everything and automate it, or you try to look at that and look for redundancies and try to optimize it, right? You try to apply, before you apply artificial intelligence, you got to apply human intelligence to it, right? And then I'll talk about some of that and why that matters. But if you look at the problem on the left side, they're pretty standard problem every organization faces today. And as you move to the right, you kind of now have problems with either expertise. And finally, at the very end, you have to deal with newer technologies, and you're kind of lost as to how do you really test these new technologies, right? So you have two things here. You really have the stubbornness of existing technologies, the complexity of existing technologies, and the proliferation of new technologies, and they both coming together, and it's kind of a perfect storm. So you cannot really get rid of your backlog, but you got to also deal with newer stuff. How do you really manage it, right? And that is a complex situation which all of you in your respective organizations you're going to be faced at some point of time. So these are three different dimensions why AI is really important, right? So we talk about the SDLC cycle, we talked about the CIO's requirements or their initiatives, and finally we talked about what are the current challenges in testing, right? So given these motivations, the next thing to really look at is let's look at what are the different ways in AI can really be leveraged. So I'll kind of give two different views. So this is the top-down view, if you will, of how to look at it. So you can look at three different buckets here, right? So the first bucket on the extreme left is increased coverage and agility, right? Now, if you look at increasing coverage and agility, what that really means and what was talked about in the previous slide also is that you have to really look at your test cases. You have to make sure that the ones you're really automating are the ones you really need to automate, which means you got to take care of redundancies and get rid of that. At the same time, you have to also be able to do the least needed in order to have quick churn on your software, right? The next part in the increased coverage and agility essentially is test case generation, right? So now today we are all responsible for writing test cases, whether you're writing it in BDD or any other format. But now think about this, right? So a tool that can help you actually generate test cases from existing models is extremely useful, right? So from a business perspective, when CIOs talk about increasing coverage and agility, the AI technologies which help you do that are going to fall in those kind of buckets. The next slide is going to kind of dive into a little bit deeper. So this is just to set the stage. The one in the middle is called improve quality. That is what we all strive for, right? Our goal is to really improve quality, right? That is basically table stakes, as I say. But if you look at the things that AI can really help you, is that today we tend to find bugs, right? And that is what we all do. But it will be great to actually have something predict bugs for you. Say that, okay, maybe this piece of software really is where your bugs lie, right? Hey, why don't you look in this direction, right? Now we don't, we have human intelligence that we always need to apply, right? There's a big delta between what AI can do and what really encompasses everything that you need to get done, and the delta is really human intelligence. But human intelligence aided by AI to kind of point you in the right direction is lethal, right? Is really lethal for bugs, not for us, right? Is really lethal for bugs, right? So if you think about the middle section, improve quality, which we all do day in and day out. Think about AI tools which can really help you, and there are AI tools today which help you around defect prediction, and also we call it prescription. I'll talk about a little bit later on what those are. Result analyzer is just a term that we use for basically saying that you have a lot of this data coming in, and what do you do with it? You need to kind of analyze it and get analytics and intelligence out of it. And that is also what's going to improve quality. And the third part where AI will really help you is improving efficiency, right? So you have found the bugs and it helped you find bugs. It has helped you get value in your agility cycle. But hey, you're kind of burning through maybe $20 to $30 to $40 to $50,000 in your AWS instances, and everything looks great, but it costs you a lot of money, right? So you're going to get a call from somebody someday, right? What is happening, right? So how do you manage the efficiency to make sure that your infrastructure optimization is managed along with your need for AI by AI tools themselves, right? So you have automation, execution, infrastructure optimization managed in a very streamlined manner, and finally to do some test data management. How many of you here struggle with test data, right? No one wants to hear about test data, right? We all want test data, but if you have to kind of create some, it is painful, right? So test data management using AI is another area. So these are three important buckets. The other way that we actually like to put it is in this form. This is a little more busier slide than previous one, and I think I have got some arrows to aid you there. So let's go through some of this really quick. So one on the very left is test case generation that we talked about, right? So model-based testing. How many of you here have heard about or use model-based testing? Right? So model-based testing is a very nifty way of taking your problem statement and trying to create a model out of it and use that as your starting point for taking your testing forward. Correct? And the advantage of that is that you have a very strongly, for those who are programmers here, you understand it's a very strongly typed to your domain problem. Right? And that keeps it very tight in terms of your coverage, etc. So model-based testing is an important area within the test case generation realm. The next piece, if I go further down, is test case optimization. So test case optimization is essentially taking your 100,000 test cases or even 10,000 test cases and trying to find duplicates in a very semantic manner. Right? If you say a very simple example, right? If I have a test case which says a test step which says click on the login button, or if I have a test step which says press on the login button, how many of you think that they are different? They are the same, right? So we want AI using natural language processing engine to really figure out these semantically similar sentences and hence semantically similar test cases and kind of whittle it down to a list which is manageable. right? So you would end up with something like maybe from 100,000, you could end up with 60,000 test cases you really have to automate now. You don't have to worry about the remaining 40,000 because they were all duplicates, right? So test case optimization is nothing but looking at your entire universe of test cases and trying to optimize it to a level that really is unique enough to be automated. Yeah. Then if you look at the quality and user experience improvement on top, this is exactly what I talked about in terms of defect prediction and defect prevention, or prediction and defect and prescription. So the idea is that you have, so we have a tool which is called Predictive QA, for example. So what it does today is that you have an entire backlog of bugs over the last 2 years, a defect in Jira or any other system. We can actually take that data and try to apply a machine learning model to it to really give you a prediction as to what your future would look like in terms of your product bugs, right? And what that helps you, as I mentioned earlier, it helps you guide in the right direction, and then you can apply human intelligence on top of it. And not only that, but AI can also help you actually then take it to the next level and say we can apply prescription to it, which is I have this list of bugs that it predicted in these different modules based on what you've done historically for those bugs. In terms of what automation have you run, it can actually take the step forward and say that I think you need to run these kind of automation to make sure that you're running the right amount of regression, right amount of smoke test to get you the best coverage, right? These are decisions that you do today in some tribal form, sometimes in a spreadsheet format, etc. This is where AI can help you, right? And at the end result of that is quality and user experience improvement. The next area where AI can really help you is efficiency and time to market improvements, as we like to call it. And this is exactly what I mentioned is you have optimization of infrastructure. For example, one of our tools can really help you and figure out and say that this particular function in your Selenium automation code is really taking most of your processing time and your compute power, and that is basically costing you maybe $2,000 extra a month, right? And what it does it based on analytics, that's one, but it also does based on a model that it knows applies to the logs of Selenium logs that come out, right? So you can actually go through your logs and spend a lot of time trying to figure it out, but you can use AI to really help you get that optimization. And the next level after you get that is basically to figure out what kind of infrastructure do I need to really make it really work for what I want. The last one in yellow, I think it looks yellow there, doesn't it? Okay, kind of. Is really AI testing AI, right? How do you test chatbots? How do you test voice bots, right? How do you test an NLP engine itself? So to test AI, right, you need to have a software which is more intelligent than your standard automation. That's why you need AI testing AI, right? So the last thing here in yellow is basically you would find a lot of these newer technologies that you really need to kind of have testing done in a different way, right? For example, you have robotic cognitive automation, right? It's not robotic process automation, it's cognitive automation. How do you test a robotic cognitive automation engine, right? Any of you who would ever have to deal with this would find that the tools to do that really need to be more intelligent than what they are today, and that's where AI would come into play. Okay. So this is just a quick slide on how we look at AI tools or AI services or AI tools and services for testing. And this is what we call Astute, which is basically our automated testing suite. And the components of Astute here are really the components I talked about earlier, right? So we have something called as a TOBot, which is test optimization bot, which will help you in the first piece of the optimization I talked about. Right? We have acceptance bot, which says that basically after your automation is done, does it agree that it's good quality or not good quality, right? Then we have result analyzer, we got predictive engine and prescriptive engine. This all together forms a suite of tools and services that you can really help implement AI as part of your testing, right? So this is a very specific instance of how we like to look at the world and try to present it to a lot of our customers. So a couple of quick use cases. So this is one of the largest national bank, I think, and we did test case optimization for them. So the example is very similar to what I mentioned earlier. We took about 100,000, more than 100,000 test cases, brought it down to less than 60,000 test cases by looking for duplicates, and this was done heavily by using NLP engine to really find semantically similar sentences. The next one here is again an acceptance bot. This is another tool that we have as part of our Astute suite, and the idea is that it looks for different rule engine. It looks for different rules to figure out whether a particular automation code is high quality, whether the automation runs are really meeting certain criteria. So a lot of it is analytics here, but there's a small layer of AI on top of it, just to basically learn from the previous runs to figure out, what is the optimum run that you can do to get the right acceptance at any point of time. And then, of course, we did predictive QA. So in this particular customer, they had bugs worth about 3 years worth of data. And a lot of the struggle was essentially to figure out what the resource allocation should be for QA. And what we really helped them here was really do some predictive analytics for them to figure out, based on whatever bugs you have, we think that these 3 or 4 modules of your product are really the most troublesome, and you got to really get your best folks focusing on that. So again, as I mentioned, it's an aid to the testing professional or even the testing engine. Yep. So having talked about AI, there are a few tools in the market already which help you in different. I don't know how much you can see from there, but the idea, if you look at the spectrum of tools, AI tools in the market, and it's a lot more than that, right? We just try to fit just a bare minimum. But the idea is that it's across the entire DevOps or SDLC cycle, right? And if you look at testing, which is the one, the slice in the middle, you have AI tools which very specifically help you for certain problems, right? It helps you with test case optimization, test case generation, test data generation, etc. And the important thing to remember here is that you may have a tool and tool looks great. However, unless and until you're putting a lot of effort behind it to really configure it for your scenario, the tool may not really succeed, right? And I think that's an important takeaway from this. So tools help you kind of get you to a certain level, but then beyond that, you got to really put in the effort to make sure you tune those tools for your specific AI needs. And my next slide really will talk about exactly that. Is the concept of AI readiness. So what does it mean for your organization to be AI ready? So how many of you here think that your QE organization is ready for AI today? At least one? Almost ready? No, not really. That is exactly the challenge, right? Now the reason is because of that. The first thing is data, and data, right? You need a lot of data, and you need good data for AI to work, right? Otherwise, it's garbage in and garbage out, right? So that is very important. So you got to make sure that if you need data, you need to have data of a certain quality. There's a lot of cleansing that needs to be done, right? So it doesn't work automatically. You could use one of the tools from the previous slide, but unless and until you apply your intelligence and get the data cleansed in a certain manner for it to work, it's not going to really work. So data, and data. Continuous training, right? So I'm sure, how many of you have kids at home? Can you just train them like once a year and then forget about it and they're completely trained? You got to tell them again and again and again and again. You got to change your strategy and tell them this way and that way, right? Exactly with AI too. You got to continuously train your data, your model, sorry, not your data, your model, right? So you have a trained model, but then it needs to learn from more data. That's how it becomes better, right? Just like our children, right? And these two things are very important. And the reason why you don't feel we are ready for it, because A, you may not have data, or B, you may not even have the automation level, the third bullet point, right? Unless you have automation, you cannot go to AI. You cannot go from manual to AI automatically. You could try to go there, but you're going to fall flat, right? So you need a high level of automation. That is what we call AI readiness, right? So when customers, we have a lot of prospects who come to us and say that I need AI today and we need it working by end of the month. We said great, and then we ask them a few questions to see where they are, and they probably have less than 40% automated. So we say, okay, you got to be AI ready first, right? And you got to do your automation and then think about data and stuff like that. The last but one is custom built models. It's a certain nuance of AI where you have models which work for a plethora of use cases, then you have models which work for very specific use cases. And in some cases, you'll find that your existing generic models will kind of max out, and then you have to create some specific custom model. And the reason I put that in is because when you reach advanced level of this problem, you'll find that you have a skill set issue at some point. We need to now create the specific models for your specific scenario, right? And finally, stakeholder involvement and commitment. I put it in there because everyone loves to see some cultural issues, right, in what we do. So it's always a big deal. The next slide is just another view of the whole problem. Is that I talked about data, and data. It is a complex thing. A lot of the customers and prospects we talk to are probably in the leftmost quality metrics section. For you to really be ready for AI, you should be in that yellow columns, right? You really need to have sophisticated data to really start using it. So the movement from left to right is really a movement towards AI readiness, right? And if you go and evaluate this, it's a good slide, and I think hopefully all of you take selfies with the slide or just a picture, right? It's a very good slide because if you go and evaluate your organizations today, I'm pretty sure you'll find you also somewhere between quality metrics and quality analytics, and that's actually an eye opener because that sets the stage for what you need to do, right? All right, so with this, I would like to quickly introduce Murali. So Murali is from Varian, and we worked with Varian to help them, what I call AI ready, but really from Murali's perspective, really getting a lot of the automation done. I'll let Murali kind of speak to the next couple of slides.
Thank you,
Yeah.
and thank you, Sanil. It was a good eye opener for me. In fact, thank you for that. And just two starting notes. One is about the first slide, which Sanil was talking about, the AI readiness, and we started with about 30% of testing that we are effort right now, and we have moved into a 20% of effort. That's where we are trying to get AI ready, but we are not there yet. Let me be honest. And then the second point which I want to highlight is we are not the customer which when Sanil was mentioning about 1 million test cases, we are not the one. So, yeah. So just to talk about what we do at Varian is just to give a quick 30-second introduction. We are a leading medical device manufacturer, and we make medical device for oncology treatment. And we have good enterprise-wide applications starting with SAP, Salesforce, and multiple applications that we have. And we engaged with Infostretch to start building our enterprise suite platform for Salesforce and service applications. And that's when we started this engagement. And before we started this engagement, we had a huge amount of test cases, which, as Sanil rightly pointed out, which were redundant. And as a part of this exercise, we kind of did a due diligence and then cleaned that exercise as a home cleaning practice. That's the first step before even we started the automation process. And after we cleaned that, we started doing the automation, and right now, we have kind of reached about 80% automation, not again 100% there. We don't want to reach 100%, by the way. We are 80% automated in the Salesforce platform, and we are running pretty good in terms of the automated suite for Salesforce. And as rightly he pointed out, the next step is getting into AI. But before that, we have to clean our backyard before we move into the AI space.
Should we next slide?
So some of the key challenges, again, I wanted to highlight here is, as we discussed before, we had very limited automation when we started. And the Salesforce was the second platform which we automated. The first one was SAP. The whole SAP platform was automated. And with the experience from SAP and Salesforce, now we have pretty good confidence that we can probably get into more automation with kind of support from partners, and within our own homegrown team, we have a pretty good hang on in terms of how we can probably do automate. And that's probably a ready state for us to get into the AI kind of a space, how we can probably detect the bugs within the system, because enterprise-wide systems, there are a lot of bugs that we are receiving, and the effort that we are spending towards identifying and resolving the bugs are huge. And the cost that we are spending there is also huge. And if you are able to pull in some kind of an AI there, you'll be able to save probably close to millions of dollars there. Yep. So the kind of engagement results which I want to talk about is, we had a partner with Infostretch, and they started first doing the cleaning exercise of what we have as a test suite, understanding the whole landscape of Salesforce, and then redefining what we actually need to have, working closely with our functional team, understanding what needs to be done, and then after the cleaning exercise, then we started doing the automation based on the sprint. We created multiple sprints according to the priority of the application, and once we kind of rolled out multiple sprints, then we are at the right stage right now where we have done 80% automation, as I mentioned before.
Cool. Thank you, Murali. Helpful. You. Any questions for me? I know yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It was an excellent presentation.
Sure.
A lot of these industries, like banking, you mentioned healthcare, perhaps even medical equipment, I mean, very heavily regulated. You talk about the importance of data. Regulators are increasingly looking at data and the control of data. So is that a blocker to this, and how do you overcome it? And the regulators are key stakeholders too, right? So
it is definitely an excellent question, and it is definitely a big blocker for us. So when we started our engagement, we had, I'm sure you might be using Tosca heavily. So one thing in Tosca that the primary purpose of we choosing for Tosca is primarily because of the regulations. So what the advantage of Tosca is that they have a practice of DocuSnapper. You might be knowing that. So they have a practice of attaching the screenshots and getting a right documentation level that we want to achieve. And again, that's one puzzle piece of the puzzle. The second piece of the puzzle is with the kind of regulation that we had, we were doing overburdening our test cases and test library, which we are not expected to do that far. So that is the exercise that we are doing initially to trim it down based on risk analysis. So we did an impact analysis and did a risk analysis, and that risk analysis gave us a kind of a feeling in terms of what is essentially needed with a specific regulation in mind. And with that, with the trimming of data and with risk analysis, we are able to achieve much better results. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, so there's an audit trail, but I mean, do you find regulators in your industry are skeptical about the application of AI?
Not really, not really. So they are. So again, we are testing the waters right now. So we are kind of keeping our fingers crossed and getting into that far. We are not sure yet. Let me be honest there. We are not sure there, but we are hoping that we will be there yet shortly.
I think those who were, I don't know if it's a politically correct statement, but those who are holding a gun now have a bazooka with them. They really don't know. They're trying to solve the same old problem, right? I think the problems they'll try to solve are going to be much wider. That's where I think it will kind of match up with.
In fact, with the regulations, Agile was a big challenge for us because when we go multiple sprints, the last sprint is going to impact the first one, and we have to do an end-to-end integration testing. So we are facing such challenges, and we are able to overcome based on specific methodologies and impact analysis.
So we'll take two questions probably. I think you had one. And then.
Yeah, so for the test case optimization you mentioned, you use
Yes.
NLP engine.
Yeah.
So Astute using any third-party NLP engine like a Dialogflow or anything, or you have your own, built your own?
So we have both. We have one open source engine that we also use, and then we have another option where we can actually use a third party like API.ai too. So they're both combinations that can be done.
Wonderful. One more question, only for you. So are you guys using Tosca or Astute?
Tosca.
Combination both.
Tosca.
Okay. Why not Astute?
Yeah, I think I gave him a first
We use
dibs.
Tosca. Tosca was our first.
You got question, got answer?
First was second one.
I have a quickly with you, Doug.
Okay.
What are the tools and like skill set you need for like automating or any using a Tosca, right? So is there any skill set defined for the QA tester or like Tosca, normal QA people we can give a training and they can start the testing scenarios. There's no
Yeah, yeah.
So, but using the AI in the
Yeah,
is
yeah.
there any different skills we need or
So AI, if you look at Astute, for example, it is not really, we don't talk about it as a tool. It is basically a bunch of services powered by AI tools, right? So we bring in the necessary skill to make that happen, right? But a lot of it is pretty generic skills except for the AI piece of it, really.